Joining me right now is Mr. Marshall Masters. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. It's good to be back with you, Michael.
Good to hear your voice.
Yeah, good to hear yours. We've done a lot of good shows over the years. I hope this one is going to be just as entertaining and interesting and informative as we always do.
As always, it's going to be entertaining and informative, and I was going to call you Mr. Marshall Masters. I'm not sure why. I stopped myself.
You do that. Well, that's okay. You know, I always tease people when they do that, and I just say, you can call me anything you want, just don't call collect. And they go, why? Because if you collect, you're in lockup.
That's right. I mean, I've known you long enough, I could just call you Marshall.
Yeah.
But I do like calling you Mr. Masters as well. It just sounds a very professional, I guess you can say.
Yeah, I'm good.
But yes, you don't mind. And of course, Marshall, we've been doing shows for such a long time, most of them covering Planet X and all kinds of various topics throughout the years since we've been doing these shows together.
Yeah, we really have.
That's insane. We've been doing it for years, Marshall.
Yeah, and our shows are always excellent. My audience always loves our shows.
As do mine. They are always wanting to hear more from you, so that's what we're doing here tonight. A lot of people wanting to know what's going on with Mr. Marshall Masters and what your thoughts and opinions are from all these current events unfolding around the world. We have, it almost seems like we're kind of on the brink of Armageddon here, where nuclear weapons are something that's being talked about, no longer something that was, sort of flirted with in the ether. Now it's actually coming to fruition. Now the mainstream is sort of pushing that narrative. It almost seems like we are wanting a war.
Well, I agree with you. To be honest with you, I really feel like we are, and I'm not saying we. To me, this is the cabal.
Yes, the cabal.
And, oh my God, I couldn't believe it. McDonald's now has pulled out of Russia. All of those stores that they had, and McDonald's was in Russia when it was still the Soviet Union, okay? They've been with them forever. And when I was doing business in Russia,
right,
in the tour business in the 90s, I would go over and I would take out my field operators. We were doing travel business planning. And so I had my operators on the ground to take care of my customers. And I would always say, oh, let's go have a nice lunch. Now, for me, a nice lunch was this wonderful Georgian restaurant in the Starry Arbat in Moscow. And I didn't care what it cost.
Right.
They always wanted the McDonald's.
They want over a nice lunch. You can have McDonald's anywhere in the world, but they want McDonald's in Russia.
They wanted the McDonald's.
Oh my God!
I would tell them, I flew halfway around the world for junk food. Give me a break.
Yeah, come on.
But I would just, okay, you want McDonald's? Go to McDonald's. So I would take them to McDonald's. But here's something interesting. At that McDonald's in Moscow, because that was the one I was always going to, the one that was the very first one back during the Soviet Union. They were always using potatoes, meat, bread that were sourced from Russia. They weren't importing that. And I will tell you, McDonald's in Russia tasted better than McDonald's here.
Really?
Yeah, because of the food quality was better. And the potatoes, the French fries were exquisite. I mean, really, French fries at McDonald's generally good, but
I see.
In Moscow they were exquisite.
It's probably
it was those Russian potatoes.
I wonder if it has anything to do with just American culture today. I mean, those that show up at McDonald's to work, they don't really care too often about their job.
Mm-hmm.
So that would probably lead them to perform the job very poorly. Maybe those in Russia, maybe they cared a bit more. Who knows?
Well, they did a really good job. The Russians liked it. They would stand in line for that stuff. There was nothing fast about it. I can tell you that. But they're pulling out. I mean, I see, what they're doing now. And this kind of reminds me of the early days before World War II broke out. Because why did the Japanese attack us at Pearl Harbor? Because we cut them off on fuel, scrap steel, and everything else. And they attacked us because they were down to like 6 months of oil in their reserves after we shut them off. And that's what triggered World War II, getting us in on the Pacific side. Well, doing the same thing. Biden, all he's doing is he is pushing these people, and they're trying to crush them, okay?
Yeah.
But this is going to blow back. I mean, come on. Michael, the largest producer of fertilizer in the world is Russia. And it's springtime. Guess what we need? What we need is fertilizer. We don't need fertilizer. An embargo. And this insanity just keeps going on and on. It's this insane brinksmanship. And I agree with you. I'm totally on board with you that we're the ones trying to provoke something.
It almost seems that way if you listen to what's going on in the media. And of course, for those that don't know, President Vladimir Putin's decision to sort of invade Ukraine is having these drastic consequences politically and socially for our friends in Russia. Lots of innocent people out there that want nothing to do with any war, and they are having to pay the price for their leader. They're banned from virtually everything.
They are. And, it's the Ukrainian people. I mean, it's like, I feel sorry for them.
Yeah.
But, we have to, there's two things with Putin. One, he's going after the weapons research biolabs, and he's going after the neo-Nazis. Now, our government has acknowledged that we have weapon biolabs.
That's true.
Because they said they don't want this information to fall into their hands. This was after all of the lying to us about denial, and it didn't happen. Now we're finding out there's in some accounts, there's over 50 of these biolabs around the world developing these deadly, deadly plagues. And, Trump just said, hey, watch what's happening with Taiwan. That's going to be the next one. Well, guess what? We've got biolabs in Taiwan as well.
Yeah, we have biolabs all over the place. The question is, what exactly is going on in said biolabs? And of course, looking back at COVID, well, that's another can of worms, right?
It's a whole can of worms, and this can of worms is getting opened, and the blowback is there. It's just purely insane. I could see the West is losing the narrative here. I mean, because Putin is well within his rights. I mean, my God, people have to understand this bioresearch. They're not talking about COVID. They are talking about plagues that take half of the people who contract them and kill them and die badly. And what they can do is fine-tune this. So they can say, let's go after Caucasians, let's go after Nordics, let's go after blacks, let's go after Latinos, let's go after Slavs, and because there are genetic differences. And so they find those little minor genetic differences, and that's how they target. And so if you have biological weapons being designed literally within miles of your border that are custom tailored to your genome, would we tolerate that here in America if we found out that there were Russian biolabs in Mexico and Canada?
No, we'd go insane.
Absolutely. And you know something? I'm old enough to remember I'm
not home, by the way.
Okay. Yeah, let me just turn this phone off.
No worries. It's all good.
And but I am old enough to remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, I'm going to use an awkward word because I think it's the only one that expresses it. But I can tell you that the whole United States during the Russian Missile Crisis was scared shitless.
Oh, I bet.
And the Russian people were scared shitless too. And what started the Russian missile crisis was we provoked it. We put medium-range nuclear ballistic missiles into Turkey. right? So Russia's sitting there and it's got nuclear missiles that could just literally launch, and before they even know what to do about it, they're already detonating because it's such short range. And that was the reason why they put medium range missiles into Cuba. So when they resolved the missile crisis, they just quietly made an agreement. We agreed to remove our missiles, and they agreed to remove theirs. And that's how the Cuban Missile Crisis was resolved. At least we had people who could walk and chew gum and think rationally and brought us back from the brink of war. But, what do we got? I mean, Biden?
Our great president, yes, Joseph Biden.
I mean, it's like this guy, when it comes to foreign policy, he's never been right about anything. And his brain is toasted. This is really scary right now. And, I think we could very well have a situation where we come right up to the edge of another major nuclear crisis.
It seems like it.
And then when that happens, we will all be shitless again. And when that happens, imagine that the fastest way for us to get out of the predicament is for the rhinos in the swing states who helped the Dems steal the election go, let's recall the electors. This is the fastest way to get rid of this guy. And that's what happens. So we see one state recalls their electors, and then it'll go down like a chain of dominoes. All right. And I could see that. We're going to destabilize. We're trying to destabilize Russia. No way. I did business in Russia for many years. All right. I had a travel business. I was there a dozen times. I always would fly over in December, come back in January as a rule, because that's when I did my work to go out and prepare for my travel clients. And this situation in Ukraine for Putin is bet the farm. He is not going to be intimidated. He's anticipated what's going to happen. And for the Ukrainians, Oliver Stone has a brilliant documentary on Ukraine, put it out in 2014. It was banned by YouTube. You got to find it elsewhere. But if you watch that, it takes you through the history of all of this stuff. And a lot of folks don't realize that during World War II, that's when the neo-Nazi movement really took over in Ukraine, because a lot of the Ukrainians enlisted in the SS as concentration camp guards. And they really enjoyed being cruel to the people. They were monsters. So this neo-Nazi thing, this is just not one of these hollow, accusations we see in cancel culture. There is substantial history. That's the reason why Stone's film, has been banned and suppressed. And if you watch it, it is superb. I cannot begin to recommend it enough. And it'll give you an idea of what's going on. There's a lot, but, the other thing is what happens when all of a sudden we find out in Taiwan, because everyone's waiting for China to go invade Taiwan, and all of a sudden Taiwan is saying, yeah, we're developing these deadly viruses. So does that give China, the CCP, cause to invade Taiwan, to take those out? And maybe they don't invade directly. Maybe they do surgical strikes. All right. The thing is that we shouldn't be in this situation with the Russians. All right. It's interesting, during World War II, we were allies with the Chinese and we were allies with the Russians. And everybody pulled their fair share. And the fact of it is if the Russians hadn't sacrificed a lot of blood and treasure at the Battle of Kursk, frankly, I don't think we'd have made it off the beaches in France.
And Marshall, going back to the whole claim of Nazis in the Ukraine, I mean, we've all seen the photographs and we all know about the Azov battalion. I don't know if I said that correctly, but those are Nazis, by the way. They have their symbols, quite up front.
Absolutely. And when you see Stone's documentary, boy, he gives you the nitty-gritty.
Yes, but our country has a very deep history with Nazis anyway. So, I mean, I'm not really surprised, to tell you the truth, that we would be backing these people. I mean, how do you think we defeated Russia going to the moon?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we didn't really defeat them, but you know what I'm saying.
Our Nazis were better than their Nazis, right?
Correct.
I mean, this is, the guy that took us to the moon is the same guy that was dropping missiles on London.
That's right.
And that's the odd thing about, life in general. But I think, first off, the people of the world, we don't like war.
No.
We have to be tricked into it. We have to be bullied into it. All right. I don't think since World War II there's been a legitimate war, except just a few that we've been involved in. Mostly since World War II, we basically get an ass whooping and spend a lot of money for it.
And Marshall,
this right now is
yes.
we're pushing it. We're pushing. If this goes nuclear, I think it's going to be on us.
Yeah, and Marshall, just to add on to this conversation, I'm not actually cheering for Russia or the Ukraine. I kind of don't want this to be going on at all, but I mean, I'm not the one in charge of these sort of things.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, what business is it to us?
Yeah, that's another thing.
Yeah, Congress just had a middle of the night. They passed legislation in the middle of the night so they could send billions of dollars to the Ukraine.
Billions, yes, I saw that.
Yeah.
And I thought we were in debt.
We're in debt up to our cajoodles.
But we have trillions of dollars to send in foreign aid to the Ukraine.
That's right. And we want to send them billions and billions of dollars to defend their border, and ours are wide open.
Yeah, that makes no sense at all, by the way. So, and even a couple years ago, our media was basically saying how corrupt the Ukraine was, and now we are at their feet. Mm-hmm. How did that happen?
It
blows my mind.
There's a lot of insanity here, but I think this is a lot of manipulation. This is banker-driven. When we get into wars, it's bankers pushing us in the media. Bankers in the media love wars. And I don't think our media has been honest with us about war since World War II. And we're going in the wrong direction. A lot of folks are sensing it. This is a time of peril, and we are the ones making that peril.
Right. Well,
I see it on us. Putin to me is no saint. I'm not saying
sure.
He's the good guy. All right, but strategically, I'm looking at this, and this again. I lived through the missile crisis.
Yeah, you've been through this before.
So I was young.
Yeah.
I was very young then, but I could remember all the adults around me just going absolutely berserk.
Yeah. I mean,
they hit the gun shops and the pawn shops, and there wasn't a pistol, rifle, or shotgun left.
My God. Yeah, that must have been a truly frightening time for you being a child and seeing how all the adults, all the bigger people in the room reacting this way. I'm sure it had an effect on you.
Absolutely.
Lord.
You don't forget that. And so, and I'm really seeing we're going back to this, and we're going to be at the brink again. The problem was the last time we were at the brink, at least we had intelligent people who loved their children. We have people who are leading right now that love their children but don't love ours.
That's right. And then you have some people out there that love children in general, and not in the good way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, lots of human trafficking, sex trafficking in both Russia and the Ukraine, by the way. So it's kind of hard to sort of pick sides when you both know, when you know both sides are, they're pretty much evil and corrupt, just like we are here in America.
They are, but I am starting to see. When I look at a broad picture, I'm seeing really positive things happening.
Oh, I'm hoping, yeah.
I mean, the globalists are on back foot because they tried desperately to start war with Ukraine and Russia. They get us embroiled in that. That's by getting the Poles to send their MiG-29s directly to the Ukraine. And the Poles said, hey, no, we're not going to start World War III. You want the MiGs? Fine, we'll give them to the Americans, and then you can do whatever you want with them as long as you replace them with an F-16. And our government went, well, no, because we want you to do the dirty work for us in starting the war.
That's what we do.
That's what we do, and the Poles don't want to do it. So there's definitely the push to do it. For those people that follow guys like Kash Patel and others that are talking about devolution, and it's always been, is it just an interesting hypothesis or devolution real? Well, my question is if devolution is not real, we know that the one thing liberals want to do more than anything else is shut down Gitmo. They haven't been able to shut down Gitmo. They tried to start this war with the Poles. It didn't work. And what was easy for them to do before is not. And so the manipulations, who knows? This could be devolution. It could be any number of things. But I think for all of us, what we have to do is look at and say, it's freedom. There's a global move for freedom. And people are understanding that there are a small number of folks in the world who want to control everyone, and they want to depopulate the world. So they have fewer people to enslave, which is easier for them to control. And what we're going to be seeing in the coming years is what we're already seeing now. Insurance companies are talking about 300% increase in death claims for life insurance. The military is reporting with a young population a 300% increase in cancers.
Oh, great.
Okay.
More things to worry about, yeah.
More things. And now we're seeing that just here in this little town that we have here, we've got one mortician serving this little town. And normally he's, had all kinds of free times on his hands. Right now, he's so overwhelmed, their bodies they haven't been able to even pick up yet, and they're starting to smell.
Ooh, that's not good.
Because, it's not good, but he's overwhelmed. People are dropping left and right. And so this is happening. We have a lot of this going on. But looking realistically long term, because for me, it comes down to the Planet X flyby, what you and I have been talking about for years.
For years, yes.
And when this happens, oh, baby, okay, if you ain't ready, you're toast. And the population reduction is already taking place. We're already seeing it. We're not having I can remember 6 months to a year ago, we were talking almost in a theoretical sense, or, this is what's coming, and now it's come.
And now it's here, yes. We did talk about, like, the possibility of an EMP or like a nuclear bomb going off or something of that nature. We have talked about these things in the past, but here we are, a step closer to all these things coming to fruition, Marshall. It's kind of insane.
It's insane, but my belief has always been what the elites have is force. They can force their will on people. True power comes from God, and it comes from the bottom up. And what we're seeing are this is a grassroots freedom movement, the Great Awakening. It's growing and growing and growing. And, just look at, for example, let's talk about YouTube as an example. When I started doing YouTube, it was, a public forum.
It was in the Wild West at one time.
It was, and it was, I'll tell you.
It was fun.
I loved it. I loved it,
Me too.
In the first few years. But now it went from being a public square to a public landfill.
Yeah.
Because in a landfill, you can still find, goodies, but you got to go through a lot of garbage to find them. And that's what's happened to YouTube, because they've chased off so many talented people, folks like yourself and myself, who put tremendous amount of efforts into developing a platform, an audience, content, the whole thing that we do. It's a full-time business. And thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who really were putting polished and doing good work have been punished.
Yeah, they're gone.
They're gone. But, I think they thought, well, once we scare them off, we'll never hear from them again. No, they just moved somewhere else where they can do what they like to do.
Right.
And so what are we seeing? We're seeing platforms like Rumble, Getter, BitChute, Telegram. They're growing like weeds.
Yeah, they're growing. However, I'm waiting for someone to really step up their game. So we have a rival to YouTube, but nothing close just yet in terms of popularity. I mean, YouTube is the biggest mall on the planet, I guess you can say.
It is, but
for how long though,
How long?
Yeah.
I mean, for years, I was on YouTube Premium. I dropped it. Actually, I don't even go to YouTube anymore.
Oh, wow.
There's so much phenomenal content, quality, professional content. I'm talking about people who have real journalistic standards, and they have integrity, and they want to help their audience, and they do good work.
Journalism is also a very dirty word nowadays.
Pardon?
I said the word journalism is a very dirty word nowadays in terms of actual, if you read these articles from so-called journalists these days, it's kind of laughable that they call themselves journalists, to be honest.
They're not the journalists
of yesteryear, that's for sure.
I worked with two major networks back in the 80s. At that time, Texas Cable Network and Cable News Network. With Cable News Network, I did science features. I was a field producer. And I did a show for an audience of 4 million people on computer technology for Texas Cable Network. Those were the days when there was real competition in the media. CNN had to compete with 50 other news sources. This was a time when you had radio stations and TV stations in major markets like New York and Chicago were actually sending reporters. They had their own people internationally reporting for them. There was a tremendous amount of competition, and it was about getting the story and getting it right. Now, all of this has been squeezed out because this is the Bush family. They were the ones that really engineered this. We had all of these anti-concentration laws in the FCC, and they got them reversed. And that's the reason why you could drive across the country and hear Rush Limbaugh just go from station to station to station, and there's Rush, there's Rush, there's Rush, there's Rush. That's, what they were wanting to do. But to do that, they remove anti-consolidation, which is why now you got a handful of corporations that control all of the information.
That's right.
And they have been captured, and they're woke.
Yeah, sadly, those in the power, in those high-level positions, those that are in control, those that are behind the focus groups that control what you and I watch and hear on television, those are the ones that are quote-unquote woke. And you definitely see their work all over the place. We are kind of bombarded by this sort of agenda that's clearly going on that people like to sort of turn a blind eye to. But yes, it is kind of hard to watch anything nowadays without seeing that sort of archetypes work play out in front of us, Mr. Marshall Masters?
Well, I think things are going to change.
I hope to God they do.
Well, no, I'm past hope. I'm seeing it. I was in the computer business for 25 years. In the 90s, I was in Silicon Valley. I was working on the very technologies that make the internet what it is today. My clients were AT&T, Hewlett-Packard, Lockheed Martin, Sun Microsystems. You could go on, all the big guys. But I did a lot of work with Hewlett-Packard on internet stuff, which was the core foundation of what we have today. So even back then, we were talking about the very things today. This is what we were concerned about. And we were talking about it because initially we knew the internet was going to be a big, wide, wonderful world of people coming out and sharing thoughts and ideas, public forum. And then what happened? The internet went from that to becoming an online mall, and now it's just a propaganda sewer.
Right.
But people are pushing around. I think when Truth Social comes out, this is going to change it big time. Truth Social is going to change it for big time. I have an article on my website, and it's called Truth Social Under the Hood. And I'm looking at what Trump is really going after, because from what I see, what they're showing on their sites is Truth Social, which is a Twitter killer, is based on an open source platform called Mastodon, which is actually superior to Twitter. People think, Twitter is, oh my God, it takes years to develop something like that. No way. I get a 14-year-old who's an ultra uber geek, give him an unlimited supply of Red Bull and pizza, and in 12 hours you got a Twitter. So why is it so big? Why do they need all of these people, these campuses, all of this stuff? Because they're not truth platforms. They're not free speech platforms. They're behavior control platforms. And so as a professional, I understand people are understanding Twitter from what's in the business is called the front-facing side of Twitter.
I see.
That's what you're working with. What people don't realize is the back end of Twitter, which you don't see, is 90% of what they're doing. That's the behavior control aspect. These behavior control platforms want to, first off, make you captive. All right? And people will say, oh, well, it's just a limitation of the technology. Nonsense. You and I and everybody in this call, we send text messages and emails every day. It doesn't matter what computer, what program, how you do your mail, whether I'm sending it to Yahoo Mail, Gmail, or whatever, Thunderbird, or whatever you're using. It all works. It's interoperable. All right? The social media platforms are behavior control platforms. We've got to stop thinking of them in terms of applications. Because when we're doing that, all we're seeing is the front-facing side of those platforms, which is about 10%. But if we look at them as a control behavior platform, now we understand the 90% that's behind the front-facing.
Yes,
and that's
I agree.
Where they want to track us. They want to keep us captives. They want to make sure we're buying whatever we want them, we're buying what they're recommending. Everything serves them. You can't even, with Google search, you can't even get honest search results anymore because Google is profiling everything and behavior control is throwing it out. Now, here is a real advantage for Trump, Truth Social versus big tech. Trump is moving to the open source platforms. Open source, you don't have behavior control, embedded advertising, and surveilling. All right, geeks don't like that. They don't build it into the software and the code. If you go to Twitter and say, show us your programming code, they're going to go, what planet do you come from? But if you're on Mastodon, you can download the code and see exactly how it works. So And it creates a whole new environment. And that's what I see Trump doing, is he's creating a branding platform. And here's the thing, what I say in the article is that the real battle is not the front-facing side of it. The real battle is what's behind it. Because here's the advantage. If you're going open source and you're not doing all the behavior control, you only need a fraction of the amount of power, computer, and people to service that system. You're not top-heavy. Big tech is horrendously top-heavy.
Top-heavy.
They start losing a major portion of their audience. They got a white elephant problem that's going to eat them alive. And the point is, proprietary just doesn't do well against open source. Ask Microsoft. Linux operating system. People don't, wow, what's Linux? Kind of weird thing.
Yeah, I don't get that.
I never use it. People say, you don't use Linux? Every time you're on Amazon, Google, matter of fact, about 99% of anything on the internet is running on Linux servers. You got a TiVo at home? Guess what? You're a Linux user. It runs Linux. Okay? Linux is the most widely distributed operating system on the planet. It controls more of the information, and it is open source. Microsoft tried to defeat it early on with their own internet server technology. And I remember those days. You used to go to hosting companies, they'd say, well, we got Linux, and we can serve you on Linux, or we can serve you on Microsoft. And then you started seeing them dropping the Microsoft options. Now, boy, you got to scrounge around to find a hosting company that wants to give you Microsoft hosting. Nobody wants it because it's bloat code, and it's nowhere near as stable and reliable as Linux.
Yeah, every sort of thing you have nowadays is ran by Linux behind the scenes.
That's right. And so there's what Trump is doing is I see him going at the internet service provider levels, the ISPs. Now, there's three kind of ISPs. There's level one. These are the big boys, okay? They're the carriers, the AT&T, Verizon, those guys.
The heavy hitters, yeah.
All right? The heavy hitters. And they really control what's going on. But then there's tier two. Now, I call them the consolidators. They don't actually own the physical hardware like the level one owns the hardware, but they have a huge amount of traffic, and they can do business on favorable terms. So this is, you have your Microsoft, your Amazon, your Google. Google is the largest tier 2 ISP in the world, period. Okay. So this is how they've been taking out, like, remember Parler came out, and Amazon, which is a tier 2, crushed Parler. And now Parler is just, I don't know, it's out there. Nobody's interested in it anymore because they knuckled under. Then you have Tier 3. Tier 3 is what's called the last mile. Tier 3 is your little hosting company you get your cable service with in your house. Now, if you're trying to run a social media platform like Telegram or something like that on a Tier 3 service, good luck with that. It's going to be bloody expensive, and you're going to be subject to a high degree of unreliable situations. So that's the reason why you have these guys who will go to a tier 2, a consolidator. I call it the consolidator. And they're handling it. So that's really where the block is. Trump, from what I see, is wanting to build eventually a tier 2 ISP approach with his media group so that we have the volume that we can get out there and get the discounts, but we don't have woke service companies like Amazon and Microsoft that are, going out and using their position to throttle smaller companies. So there's a lot going on. I personally think Trump has his eyes on AT&T. And imagine AT&T is their problem right now as a company. They have, and it's even more. They just went out. I couldn't believe it. Now, One American News is a cash cow for them, and they went woke, and they give OAN the boot.
Well, that's where the money is. Yes, they have to sort of bend the knee, in other words, to these major conglomerates, and AT&T. For lack of a better term, they're getting their ass kicked by Verizon, though. But they're trying hard, though. They're trying.
And they have two, what they have is their wireless business is growing, but the wireless business growth, which is substantial, is not substantial enough to overcome the losses they're taking on their wired services. All right. And I mean, how many people are getting a hard line in the house anymore?
Probably not many, yeah.
Not many. And then the other thing is AT&T has all of these retirement funds hanging over them like the sword of Damocles.
Right.
So AT&T, I could see someone like Trump thinking, yeah, I can think big enough to take on AT&T. But on the other hand, Trump could go make a lateral move, and instead of taking AT&T, go partner up with Starlink. And Starlink is definitely going to be an AT&T. It's going to put a world of hurt on a lot of communication controls. But the question is will Starlink, are we going to see the same kind of manipulations that we're seeing with AT&T? All right, and where they're banning information. But still the same, I definitely think we're moving to, on the conservative side, where Trump media is going to become essentially a tier 2 provider of services for a number of different brands. And then you're going to have all of these conservative platforms that all they have to do is just change their hosting partners. So you copy your websites over to the new servers, and then when everything's ready to go, you turn a switch, and that's it. It's seamless. Nothing changes. Nobody knows the difference. But you no longer are, if you're in a situation where you have a true free speech level 2 ISP you're working through, you're not looking over your shoulder all the time to see what the cabal's going to do to you. So things are moving, and they're moving in the right direction, and people are moving with it. And that's the reason why I see it's going, because everything always comes down to bucks. No bucks, no Buck Rogers. And I see some potentially very strong things. I could see where we're going to remap the internet. And we're going to go back to that free speech, and where people can put information out, and they're no longer controlling the bullhorn. And when that happens, wow. Now, there's so much stuff that's being suppressed and withheld from us, and on a platform like Truth Social, but also keep in mind, Truth Social is open source. Open source software is good software. People knock it. They want to control crypto. The central bankers want to control it.
Of course, yeah. No surprise there, right?
I don't think eventually that they're going to succeed. What they want to do is they want to track it. But one of the things that we have to understand about crypto, and to me it's the Achilles heel of crypto, is the dual entry ledger design. And so you have, in the blockchain, you have these blockchain registers. They're dual entry. Now, the problem with dual entry is, why do you need dual entry? You and I are doing business. And if I have a wallet, you have a wallet, I hand you the money, and it goes from my wallet directly to your wallet. Think about this is, you're in a flea market or an outside market, and you got a bunch of bills in your pocket, and you go, oh, I love those tomatoes. Okay, $3, you pull out $3, you hand it to the guy. That's it. It's just that simple. So why do you need a double entry system? The reason why you need a double entry system is skim. Skimming requires double entry systems so that you can skim for taxes, you can skim through fees. You do crypto, you're always playing the VIG. You're always paying the vig on every transaction. And who does that really benefit? Well, it mostly benefits, frankly, the people who are making the coins, the ones that are minting. Because you put out a coin, and then what happens is all of the value you associate and put into that, if you invented it, is going to eventually come back to you in the form of fees that are being continually skimmed off the top on every transaction.
That's right.
So if we were going to have a really good system, it would work. I want to buy a car from you, I write you a check, right?
That's right. That's how it works.
Out of my account. The only thing I pay is the use of my account, right?
Yeah.
You don't see it. I'm not tracking you in. So that is my wallet to your wallet. And this is a problem with crypto. And this is where they can worm their way in because it's a dual entry system. And then the other thing is what happens when you have to take a crypto system and integrate it to central bank. And then that is a backdoor entrance for central bankers to come into crypto. So I hear, folks that are saying, no, it's impossible. They can't do it. They can't do it. They can't do it. But as a technology professional, I'm retired, but as a former technology professional, I look at crypto and I immediately see the back door. And, what did we just see in Canada? Where they're freezing bank accounts.
Freezing assets, yes.
People who donated money.
Insane, by the way. That is horrible.
It's absolutely insane. So people are always, you force people to go to a gray market or a black market, they will. I'll tell you a good example of a gray market. When IBM first came out with the IBM PC, this is back in the 80s.
Beige computers, yes.
And I was buying, at that time, I had a systems house in Texas. And I had customers that said, it's got to be an IBM. I said, there's other computers just as good, if not better. No, it has to be an IBM PC. And I said, okay. Well, when they first brought them out, you had to buy volume. Okay? You had to do large volume buys. So you didn't have an ability to do the onesie twosies. How did people get around it? Well, the guys that were buying in volume, in order to keep their volume arrangement with IBM, were doing what was called gray market, and they were selling their stuff backdoor. So you would buy it, and if you bought it through them officially, you'd have the IBM warranty. Otherwise, you didn't have the IBM warranty, but you could buy that computer from somebody else because it was a gray market deal. It was literally cash transactions. And I will tell you, when I was selling IBM PCs in Austin, Texas, who I was buying my gray market, quote unquote, illegal PCs from.
Your illegal PC, yeah.
Yeah. You wouldn't believe who I bought them from.
Who were you buying them from?
Michael Dell.
Really?
At that time, Michael Dell was doing business out of a 2-bedroom apartment. One bedroom had padlocks all over it, and that's where he had all his hardware. And the first time I bought a Compaq and I bought an IBM, and I had to actually meet him on the street under a light post. He opened the trunk of his car. I handed him cash money. He handed me the boxes, and I drove off. I bought a lot of computers that way, gray market, from Michael Dell. He didn't start making his own boxes actually for about another year after that.
Wow.
So, I already know where there's a will, there's a way. And that's what will happen. People will find a different way. And this whole thing, what Canada did,
that's
oh my God,
insane. Yes,
it was insane. But it also gave everybody a wake up call. This is what's called, hey,
it could happen here.
Social score.
Yes, all a part of social engineering, like these social
engineering,
these social platforms you were just talking about. That's what it is. You say behavior control. This is all part of the social engineering that goes on behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
Insane. And by the way, Marshall, going back to, all these things we originally talked about when we first started talking to each other, I just got an email not long ago, and I wanted to read it really quickly to you to entertain you here.
Sure.
It says, "Hello again. With all hell now breaking loose in the Ukraine and the beginning of what may be World War III, you are probably wishing you had secured a Vivos bunker. However, we know that affordability is the biggest roadblock to obtain a bunker and outfit thereafter." So basically, Vivos, they're back at it again with their low-cost bunkers now, by the way.
Low cost?
Low cost, they're claiming.
What's low cost?
Well, it's so low cost, Marshall, that they don't list it here in the email, so there you go.
Well, I'll tell you what. You want to go talk to Vivos and any of these other people that are building bunkers on for-profit? Here's the one question you want to ask them. Okay, it's a given. You'll provide me with this bunker, and we will survive the big bada bing. Absolutely. Yes, sir. We'll survive. You'll survive. Our stuff is great. And then you go, okay, what happens afterwards? And they're going to look at you and go, we don't know. And they're going to shrug their shoulders. And on the other hand, my book, Win-Win Survival Handbook, it's all about what happens afterwards. And this is the one thing that I see that people have to start thinking about is we're going to have a coming decade of suffering. How do we get through it? And once we get through it, what are we going to do? So these guys have all these great nifty ideas, but they put you out in the community, and I've seen, for example, they have one community where it is bunkers that are made from ammunition storage facilities.
Right, yes, I've seen those.
Okay. And here's the thing about those ammunition bunkers. They were designed that you could back in a 548 that was an ammo carrier for the military. But the door is not big enough to pull in a trailer. If you have something like that and you have a large hangar door that you could bring in a trailer, you can go out and buy a used trailer with a leaky roof, but it's not too bad for next to nothing, and you roll it in there and that's it. You don't have to worry about a leaky roof and you've got a complete unit. It's all plumbed out. Well, you can't do that. So you have to build into it. But the thing about ammo bunkers that nobody is told, nobody understands, is the thickness of the wall. Ammo bunkers are built, the side walls are extremely thick, but on top it's extremely thin. So why is it thick on the sides and thin on the top? Because if the ammunition detonates, this will force the blast to go up instead of sideways, which would then set off a chain reaction. So with these shelters, and they even show them with a skylight.
That's right.
You don't have the protection over your head that you think you have. It's along the sides of the structure, but not on top. So I look at solutions like that, and it's clever. And it's something out there, and they're serving an audience and doing what they're doing. But as someone who's been studying this for over 20 years, to me, it's a non-starter.
Right.
I don't want a thin skin over my head. And what's the point of having a bunker? You got stuff that's going to fall on you, right? You also have to worry about EMP radiation from not only atomic weapons, but you got 5G as well. You don't want all of these, you don't want this radiation pumping through your head. And a bomb that detonates an airburst, you have to have 5 feet of soil over on top of your bunker just to stop that EMP from radiating in and cooking your brains. So where's the 5 foot of overcover? So these are the questions that I raise.
Yes.
And
essentially, it's a death trap.
Yeah, it is.
And that's what Ron Paul might figure out essentially as well. For those that don't know, he apologized to his supporters recently, and of course he sealed himself up in an underground bunker in fear of the collapse of the American dollar, by the way. That's kind of insane to see him doing something like that.
Yeah.
Is he that worried?
Yeah, but I still come back to what I'm seeing happening on the ground and the awareness that's happening for people. We can look at these other folks and we can talk about them till the cows come home.
Right.
What I care about is what's happening around the dinner table.
Which is more important, yes.
That's right. And people, are there. What we have right now is an awakening, and awakenings are never pleasant. Okay. An awakening is pretty much like a root canal. You just white knuckle your way through it.
Right. And of course,
people are finding ways around to communicate. And I want to show in my communications blackout presentation in a little bit here sir. There's what we can do when everything goes, because our communication systems are immensely vulnerable, okay? More than everybody wants us to know. Even Starlink, they've lost 40 of their satellites because of a solar storm.
I believe that, yes.
Yeah. And actually, I think that was a positive thing for them. The satellites, according to them, were still, they were still getting them boosted up into their normal orbits, and so they were vulnerable at that point. The ones that are up there where they should be took it. But you still have Achilles heels vulnerabilities in our communication systems, and people who are working with the front-facing side of it don't understand it. I made my living in that black hole behind your computer modem. I understand that. I understand data centers, storage area networks, how you get all, firewalls, security. I know all that. Worked in all that. All right? I see all of that. And I see the vulnerabilities of the system. And this is something that, I want to talk at more length about it. We need to, but on the other hand, we don't have to be vulnerable to it. Now, people ask me, how many folks are going to die during the Planet X tribulation, during this flyby? And it's not a pleasant answer. But equally, it's not pleasant to say, it could be as much as 90% of the global population if we're not prepared. If we're prepared, we can save a lot more people. But the simple truth of it is, what will be the single leading cause of death during the Planet X tribulation? Very simple. Self-selection. People will make bad choices. They will go, I'm not going to worry about it. Wait and see. Somebody else will figure it out. Let's go to the mall. Whatever you want to do. You don't pay attention. That's self-selection. On the other hand, people that are going, we need to start doing something. Because survival is not a person, place, thing, or time. Survival is a state of mind. And I'm seeing that. Now, here's a major interesting shift in what's happening in America and what's going to happen over the next 2 years. Dr. Zelenko has said half of the people have been vaccinated or have received, God, I used the taboo word. Sorry for that, Michael.
No worries.
I meant to say the official government fluid. And for those who have received the official government solution, you got a 50% chance of plotzing. All right, that's it. Game over. Demographically, look at who is accepting the official government fluid. These are dominated by people on the left and the liberal areas, particularly in what we call the Clinton archipelagos, which are the coastal major metroplexes, Chicago. And these archipelagos are right on major bodies of water, Great Lakes, Atlantic, Pacific. And, over the years, how many times have we had talked about, you got to get off the coast, right?
Yeah, we've been talking about it for years.
That's right. And if there is a nuclear war,
Ooh.
what, you think they're going to want to bomb Backhoe, Idaho?
No,
I
no,
don't
no.
think so.
No.
All right.
It'll be here.
They're going to be hitting the New Yorks, Los Angeles, San Francisco. That's where they're going to hit. They're going to do the most amount of damage. These are the areas that are the most heavily vaccinated.
And most vulnerable for attack,
Most vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
So what you have is, in the course of the coming 2 years, we are going to have a major shift in politics in America as a result of this. Because what's happening is, where is the defiance? Where are the people who are going, hey, you and your official government fluid, you can kiss my ass, all right?
Yes.
I ain't going to do it. And they're coming from the right and very heavy in the rural areas. So what's going to happen is that right now the levers of power are controlled in the Clinton corridors, if you look at it realistically. This is where the levers of power are being controlled. These areas are decimated because of nuclear war, because they're having injuries as a result of the official government fluid. All right. And then on top of that, a Planet X flyby with tsunamis, impacts, floods, and whatever. And so who's going to be left? The population of the United States is whittled down. It's going to be conservatives in the flyover states are going to dominate politics in a whole massive way. So this is already going. This is the reason why the Democrats have thrown the borders over to get as many illegals in as they possibly can without vaxing them. You know, just walk across the river. Hello, how you go? Here's an airplane ticket. Go somewhere, lots of free money, and don't worry about it. You don't have to do the fluid. Because they know they have already thrown a much of their base under the bus. But these people are still, they're still chanting the chant. They're still, loyal to the cause. And they don't understand that thanks to this, there's a lot of people who are dead men walking now. And they don't know. I'm here in Maine. Now, I'm in an area of Maine that is, this area I'm in is the safest place to be for Planet X in America, period. Took me 7 years to find it, and I'm here. And I want to build a community here. Because there's good people. What we need are healthy, young families. Because right now we are facing an existential threat of extinction as a natural species, as opposed to becoming part of this transhuman insanity. Well, you look at like a state like Maine, 90% of the population lives within 10 miles of the coast. Not good.
No, not at all.
So this is just an idea of, and if you get off the coast, on the coast, it is absolutely blue as blue gets, because most of these people are from New York, Greenwich Village, Massachusetts, these places. They come up to Maine to go slumming, retire, get a cheap place relative to where they're at. So that's where the blue is. You go the other 10% of the population, which is the rest of the state, they're much safer, and they're very conservative. Nothing but Trump signs all over the place here. But what I like about rural people in particular, and rural people these are the real survivors. They hunt, they fish, they farm, they barter, they work with their neighbors. If you're in the city, you don't have any idea of who's on the other side of the wall from you.
Not really, yeah.
Out in the country, you know who's around you. If they're a mile from your farm, you know who they are. You may not hang with them, but you know who they are.
Right, you're aware of their...
The country are much more savvy. And we think, people in the city think, great, if there's a problem, we'll just flood out of the city like locusts, and we're going to consume everything in sight. I'll tell you what I hear. And years I've been talking to people all across the country. I've done so much research. I've gone east, west, north, and south. And if I were to write a book about that phase of my life, it would be titled Airport Food Courts of America. Yeah. All right.
Right.
And I'll tell you what country folks say. We know every bridge, every road. We got dynamite and we got chainsaws and we know how to use them. And these are going to be tough people. And if city folk think they're going to go in and push them around, you do that. You get out in the country folk, you do that. You're going to wind up being fed to the pigs. It's just like that. So there's a lot of naivete in the cities because these people live in artificialities. If you see a tree in a city, it's because it's permitted, not because God put it there.
That's right.
Okay? And so there is a view of the world that is disconnected. You don't...
in every way, yes.
Live with the ground.
Yeah, you have lots of people very just completely disconnected from reality in major cities, of course, as you know. As everyone knows, obviously, it's pretty evidently, these things happen. You see the agendas in play. You see these folks, the ones who are in power. It's disgusting. I was trying to be kind of PC about it, but it's hard to be.
Yeah, you can't. For those of folks that are living in the city, what I would say is, hey, have you got a telecommute job now? That's one advantage of COVID. So many more of us are telecommuting. Well, when Starlink comes out, the big problem being in rural areas is the internet sucks. Okay? I can't find a more polite word. If you're out in the country, internet sucks. On the other hand, Starlink, you got a pizza-sized dish that you put up, and you're getting 5G speeds anywhere. It's a global communication system. That's going to allow people who are working off-site, working remote, that you can go anywhere. You could be in Antarctica, well, not Antarctica, they don't work up there, but I mean, you could be anywhere you get a Starlink signal and you can continue doing your job. So keep an eye open on that. And when that comes available,
it's coming.
Your company will let you relocate. My advice to you is pick up roots and move. Get out of there. What you want to do, see the difference between people who live in cities and live in the country. Let's talk about the differences. In the country, where you live is your plan A. If you live in the country, your plan A, is going to fail. And if there's a catastrophe, so you have to have a plan B. So the plan B thinking, all this Cold War stuff, is really something that's more in high-density population areas. All right? And you get out in the country, folks are much more resilient. Now, if they got to go to ground to protect themselves, they'll do it. They got tractors, backhoes, and they got friends, and everybody will pull in, and they'll work together. They know each other. They go to church with each other. They'll help out. In the city, people really don't know each other. In the city, you don't want to know anybody, right?
Right. Why would you?
That's right.
In my opinion, yes.
It doesn't have that advantage. So my advice to folks that are seeing all of this, and if you live in the city, and you can relocate without losing your income, now's the time. There's an old saying, leave the party while everyone's laughing. This is that time.
It'd be if you can afford it nowadays. I mean,
that's right.
If you do have the financial means to move, it'd be a good time to do so right now. But for some people, just getting by the week and paying their gas takes a huge toll out of the bank there for them.
It does. It does.
So they're facing all kinds of issues.
That's right. And if you do move out to the country, if you're in a conservative area, don't drag your woke nonsense in, boy. I'll tell you. You're going to be about as welcome as a bowl full of itching powder in a hemorrhoid clinic.
Yeah, you'll be very popular there.
Yeah.
Almost too popular.
Yeah, you want to get out and you got to be a good neighbor. And you got to work with the people there and become part of the community. Strive to become. You're just not someone there that says, oh, you're in the country. Great. We need service people to do my nails and wash my car. It's nice to meet you. No, that's not going to work. You got to get out there and be a part of that greater community. That's essential to it. I remember when I was I made 2 reconnaissance trips up to Whitefish Eureka area up in Montana, because this is where everybody was going. This is where you want to go. This is where you want to go. I'm telling you, it's the last place I would go on the face of the earth, because one, water is so difficult. If there's a property that has excellent water, it's been in a family trust for 100 years already. Otherwise, you're going to be perched on some rocky shale mountaintop where you got to drill 900 feet to get to water, which means you got to have 400 amp service to pull that up. What, you're going to get 400 amp service to run your well during the middle of a crisis? I don't think so. On top of that, you got all of these, diehard preppers up there with their, camouflage painted pickup trucks. I mean, Eureka is the only place where you see gun racks in Volvos. All right? I feel sorry for the people that live up there. It terrifies them because these folks are, we're out in the country and we're, doing this and we're doing that. Well, we don't want to know you. You don't want to know us. Everybody. And there's this, leave us alone kind of thing. No, that's not the way it works. Not the way it will work. And so I look at an area like that and I'm going, no way. Eureka Whitefish, get the hell out of there. Period. Just don't even bother. Because if you're going to find a good piece of property with water on it, that's it. It's going to soak it's going to soak you for money like you wouldn't believe. But on the other hand, there are a lot of areas, rural areas, where all of these onerous laws, these death taxes, have caused family farms to shatter. Because the kids are going, the property is paid off. Mom and Dad paid off the property, but we're going to have to take a humongous mortgage just to pay the inheritance. And as a result of that, a lot of, you just didn't have this handing it off from one generation to the next. And so there are a lot of land opportunities out in rural areas that are really good. And this is what you want to look for. There's ways to look for it. It's all of that's in my book, Win-Win Survival Handbook. So it's survival, frankly, is like real estate. You know what the 3 rules of premium real estate are is location, location, location. And survival is the same. The first thing you have to do, everybody wants to run out and they're buying buckets of food at Costco and stuff like that. Nah, what you got to do is work on your location. You want to get 150 miles away from a major body of water. You want to ideally be at 2,000 feet above sea level, but you can give or take on that. And, for example, here in Maine, I'm 150 miles from the coastline, but I'm 250 miles away from the eastern shoreline of Nova Scotia, which really acts like a barrier island for tsunami events in the Atlantic that would come from impacts or even, rods of gods or nuclear weapons. And that's 250 miles. So it's a general rule of thumb, but you want to be away from the water and you want to be up. And that's where you're going. And the other thing is, my strategy is you want to look for vertical land. If you're going to buy farmland, you're competing with Bill Gates and the Chinese. Congratulations. You get something on a mountainside, you get a nice piece of property. It's really affordable, and you're building on rock. Okay? You cut a wedge in the side of the mountain, you build your domes, and then you overfill, and you are snug as a bug in a rug with the strongest structures known to man. You last 1,000 years, and they will get you through a pole shift. That's what I designed in Win-Win Survival Handbook. But getting people to think that far out is really difficult.
It's very tough, yes, especially for those that are, on the older side, the senior citizens out there. It's probably difficult for them to for them to actually move and do any of these things at times. So,
that's why I call it busting a move. You got to bust up your life to do it.
Yeah, you got to find someone.
You get in front of the family. Hey, wife. Hey, kids. Guess what? We're pulling up stakes and we're going to go live out in the country, and you guys are going to have ponies and bunnies and whatever. And the kids are going, "What are you smoking, Dad?"
Yeah, that might not work out. Yeah,
that's not going to work out. People are going to resist. It's really, really hard. It's really, really hard. So this is something America could save so many people from disaster. But like I said, the single leading cause of death will be self-selection.
Right, and of course.
So it is a courageous few that understands, you know what? I need to get the family to someplace safe. My strategy is very simple. Find a nice, safe niche of the world where history can mostly pass you by and go to ground.
That'd be the safest thing. And of course, you can check out Marshall's book at yowusa.com, just in case anyone's wondering where they could find the Win-Win Survival Handbook. I'm sure some people are thinking, well, where do we get this book, the survival guide? But yeah, yowusa.com, YOWUSA.com.
That's right. And you can buy it from my site if you go to domecommunity.com and buy a signed copy, but it's also available on Amazon.
Very good. And yes, these books are quite impressive, Marshall. You spent a lot of time researching and putting these together.
I did.
Cover a lot of ground.
I have 3 principal titles for survival, which are Win-Win Survival Handbook, Surviving the Planet X Tribulation, and Radio Free Earth, which is what we're going to be talking about here in a little bit. And because altogether, this is 1,000 pages of solid documentation.
Oh, yes.
And it is to, one, help you get your head around it and explain it to others, which is Surviving the Planet X Tribulation. The other is Radio Free Earth, which is really important for communication. We go dark. We're back to sundials.
Yeah.
All right. And
if we go dark, I'm in trouble, by the way. I couldn't do anything to save my own ass here in terms of modern technology. I can't build my own radio or anything of that nature, so, I could barely light a fire.
That's it. That's the reason why. But there are things that you can do, and that's the reason why I say survival is a state of mind.
Oh, yes.
It's not a person, place, thing, or time. Consumers do that, all right? That's how they evaluate it. But true survival is a state of mind, situational awareness. And you understand that the key to surviving is, one, you need to be situationally aware. You have to honestly assess your situation. 2, you have to develop a plan to deal with it. And 3, you have to be able to commit yourself to acting on that plan, even if it's not the optimal plan.
Now, Marshall, let's get into Radio Free Earth here and talk about some of the pages and some of these slides I'm looking at here.
Yep. Let's do my communications blackout, which I have done just for you, Michael.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, by the way. It's an honor.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity because you see the need for it.
Oh, yeah.
So let's get into it. I'm Marshall Masters, and the book I published is Radio Free Earth, The Complete Beginner's Guide to Survival Communications. And you can learn more about it at radiofreeearth.org or come to yowusa.com. Now, here's a question for everyone. How could the Canadian truckers organize a grassroots movement without crushing censorship? In other words, these guys were off the radar. Think about it. Who knew? All of a sudden, they have hundreds of trucks heading for Ottawa, and it just pops at us out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere.
We're caught by surprise. I was caught by surprise, but so were the elites. That's an important thing. So why were the elites caught by surprise? All right. And especially, how did a technology dating back to the 1920s circumvent the might of the Soviet Union? This is the question to answer the first question. In the Cold War, we had like the Voice of America, and they were able to broadcast into the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union really tried to block these signals, and they couldn't do it. And when I was doing business in Russia, I was always talking to people, and they were telling me about, they'd sit around and listen, have their little radios, pull them out, and they could listen. They had BBC, Voice of America, all right? And it was interesting what the Russians used to tell me. They said all of it was propaganda. We just were looking for the ones that could give us useful propaganda, and the one they liked the most was Voice of America.
Oh, my.
And the point here is analog RF is the heartbeat of freedom. What does analog RF mean? Analog radio frequency. Old school radios that date back to the 1920 in terms of technology. Now, when you talk about these ham radios and CB radios and all that, this is in America for a long time. The ARRL, the Amateur Radio Relay League, their motto was when all else fails. And unfortunately, that motto on their organization is dying like a lot of the guys that like the radios. I mean, I have to admit, being a ham with a general license, it's mostly all Takakas.
I didn't know you were a licensed ham operator, by the way.
Yeah, I'm a licensed ham operator. I have a general license.
Very nice.
And so, but unfortunately, ARRL has moved away from this because they're going to digital radios, which require the internet, and it completely defeats the whole point of having amateur radio.
Yeah.
But they're desperate to try and get younger people who want the digital, so they're abandoning their roots to go that way. Good luck with it. I don't renew my membership. I am talking about what we need are people have to talk and think about single sideband citizen band radios. It's called SSBCB. These are the 21st century heartbeat of freedom. And this is what I want to talk to everybody. And it's worth your time, listeners, to what I'm going to tell you, because these things are cheap compared to ham radios. Ham radios, you're in the thousands of dollars if you're an enthusiast. I'm talking about radios that are a few $100s and can do some amazing things. You can communicate near and far. No license is required. They're simple to operate. They're highly portable. They're inexpensive. But, okay, granted, with cell phones and the internet, why do we need CB radios? Let's talk about assessing the threat from electromagnetic pulse, EMP, which was a report of the Commission to assess the threat to the United States from electromagnetic pulse, EMP attack, which was created by Congress and funded by Congress. And in 2017, here was their findings. Quote, a long-term outage owing to EMP could disable most critical supply chains, leaving the U.S. population living in conditions similar to centuries past prior to the advent of electrical power. Furthermore, in the 1800s, the U.S. population was less than 60 million, and those people had many skills and assets necessary for survival without today's infrastructure. I got news for you. We don't have 60 million people today that know anything what people knew in the 1800s.
Oh, not at all.
That's right. This is what consumerism has done to us. So what are we talking about with EMP threats? Let's talk about the two big ones. First, communication blackouts by natural electromagnetic pulse EMP events. Solar. A huge solar storm knocks it down. Remember, we just talked about Starlink lost 40 satellites.
That's right.
Okay, because of a solar event. But then there's communications blackout by man-made electromagnetic pulse, EMP events. All right? So that brings us to today. What do we have today? Wars and rumors of wars.
That's right.
Nuclear war concerns. And we're sitting here right now, you, me, and the people listening to this are asking the same question. what could happen.
What if? Yeah.
Yeah. So now what I want to do to answer that, because this is going to give everyone a sense of our vulnerability. In my book, Being in It for the Species, The Universe Speaks, I published that in 2014. I have an impact event prediction. Now, this book was channeled. I did part of it. A woman by the name of Antonia did much of it. And the interesting thing, we had a method of working with this when we were writing Being. We did all this work in 2013. And J.P. Jones was my assistant, and he was working on technical aspects. And we were working with the guides, and we were going through a lot of things. We were talking about the Anunnaki, they return, how do we deal with the things we're dealing with today?
Yeah.
But it was also the natural disasters coming. And what I can tell you is when we were doing this, Antonia, J.P. Jones, and myself, we were all over the map because we'd ask one question and we'd get an answer and it was like, oh my gosh, if that's that, then what about this other thing over there? So it's like the See America shortcut. We're zigzagging everywhere because we're picking up the information. And literally when we were doing the research on the book, we were about 2/3 of the way in, and J.P. Jones and I were both saying the same thing. We have zigzagged so doggone much, we lost track of where the hell we are. What are we going to do about it?
Right.
Like I said, let's just soldier on and hope to God we can clean it up later. And that's what we did. So after we finished everything, the book was written, the illustrations were done, I started working on publishing. And when I started working on the publishing, what we found was that, and what totally amazed us is while we lost track of where we were in this process timeline, the guides were always spot on the money. They were always consistent. We were the ones that were all over the place. And so in order for us to sort out what we were doing, we actually had to go back to what the guides were giving us in the readings because it was just nail-on consistent. Click, 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 connect the dots. Perfect. And there was one thing in the book, and it was a predicted impact event that is going to be devastating for the world. And we were saying, fine, where's it going to happen? The guides are telling us it's going to happen in the Eastern Atlantic. But what was really unusual for us was that the guides were extremely intense about us knowing the precise right location for that impact. And we were going, well, make it easy for us. And they said, fine, use these two cities, take this city, draw a line west, take this city, draw a line north, and that's your coordinate. So we did that, and it didn't work. It just couldn't work. And we figured, oh my gosh, that's it. Where are we at with our, we're doing channeled readings, this isn't working, We go to the guides and we tell them it's wrong. And the guides came back and they said, no, you're wrong. And we're going, we're wrong? They said, yeah, we gave you the name of two cities.
Oh, no.
The second city, actually, that same name for the city is used in two continents, Africa and Europe. You picked the wrong one. And when we picked the right one, blink, X marks the spot. All right? And here's the strange part. It was just due north of La Palma. And we know we've just gone through this major eruption of La Palma. And with that, let me just take you through the scenario. And this is in my book, Being It for the Species, The Universe Speaks, published in 2014. So this is a prediction that was published in 2014. This isn't something I did yesterday, all right? And frankly, this is something we really didn't, it was like when we were doing it, we reported it, but it wasn't clicking, it wasn't making sense to me why the guides were so intense about us knowing the precise exact location. So let me take you through the scenario of this impact event.
Go ahead.
Now, first off, what we have is an impactor that's traveling from west to east, and the impact site in the eastern Atlantic is north of La Palma and west of France. Okay? You could just draw it. And I put the location right there. Now, when we were doing this, okay, it was this was all we had from our notes in 2013 was this location. It wasn't until I was publishing the book in 2014 that I just got curious one day, and I said, they went to such great trouble to make us find this spot. So it's water. What's the deal? Maybe there's something we're not seeing. In other words, something below the surface. And when I started researching, I found the big bada bing.
Ooh.
Now, in the book, we have an illustration, and it actually, at first glance, it looks like, when you're in the airport, or you're reading the magazines and on the airplane,
yeah.
And they show the routes that they fly.
Right.
It looks like an airline route map. It's nothing like it. It's a route map, but it's not airlines. The map is for all of the undersea fiber optic cables that make the internet work. And what we found is the impact site, when we went to a seafloor view, what we see is the impactor strikes Atlantic communication nexus point for subsea cables.
Ooh.
And this one site is a massive Achilles heel. You drop an asteroid or a nuclear bomb on it, you have just destroyed 80% of the internet connection between America and Europe. All right? So if we're in a war with China or Russia and they want to break NATO and really hit NATO, this is exactly where you attack. This is exactly where you attack, is in this impact site the guys were showing, which then raises the question in my mind. Because I went back in my notes. They never said the word asteroid.
I see.
They always just said impactor.
An impactor, okay.
So if they're not saying asteroid, but they're saying impactor, what in the hell is it? That was my curious. So that led me to the next thing. Now, you can search this on the internet, called Rods of God.
Rods of God, yes. I'm quite familiar with that.
These are weaponized asteroids, and these are ideal for false flag attacks. Now, these are space-based kinetic weapons, and they have devastating nuclear-like detonation on impact capabilities. They're very simple, 20 foot long, 1 foot in diameter, and these tungsten rods are dropped from orbit and achieve speeds of 10 times the speed of sound. All right? And they're in space. You see, it's just tungsten. Now, why tungsten? Tungsten, by weight, is nearly as heavy as gold. In fact, a lot of people have been sold tungsten, gold-plated tungsten forgeries in bars and coins. And if they don't put it on a scale, they don't know the difference, but it feels like gold in your hand. It's that heavy. So tungsten's really heavy. And you drop it from orbit, it becomes a kinetic weapon, and when it hits, it is going to hit with it's going to release as much energy as an atomic bomb. Now, the interesting thing of it is that it's perfect for a false flag attack because it doesn't leave a radiation footprint where they could go and find, okay, we sampled the radiation. It came from here, it came from there. All of this has been mapped out. It won't map out because it's just tungsten. All right? And it is going to cause a massive amount of damage. So let's go through, assume it's a rod of God. All right? And how does this go through? Well, first off, after the impact, the internet goes down. It goes down hard.
Which will happen.
But then comes ejecta and ashfall on Europe. And interestingly enough, the country that's going to get hit the hardest in this is actually going to be Germany, because this is where the ejecta, the large rocks, are going to fall in. Meanwhile, you have everything else is going to get hammered. Now, what this is going to do is when this impactor hits, it's going to generate tsunamis that strike Europe and America. All right? And the big one, because remember, it's traveling from west to east, so that hits into Europe, going to be devastating. London and Paris are not going to escape this. First, they have the ashfall and the ejecta, but that water is just going to come in, and the rivers are going to surge, and London and Paris are going to flood catastrophically. Now, then comes the second act. Remember, I told you when we got the accurate coordinate from the guides, it was due north of the Canary Islands, where La Palma is located. Well, what happens is this detonation sets off another eruption of La Palma. La Palma has a slide block event. That generates a massive tsunami that's going to hit from the Caribbean to Nova Scotia and into Canada. It's going to be awful. And this is going to cause a huge amount of death along the east coast of the United States. And then from there, there's other events, and it goes on and it goes on. So here is, if we are provoking China and we're provoking Russia, particularly Russia, they have space-based capabilities. No doubt we have rods of God in space, so do they, because there are no treaties that prohibit it. All the treaties prohibit putting nuclear weapons into space. A tungsten rod is not a nuclear weapon, so there's nothing that prevents it. And this impact triggers the La Palma eruption and tsunami, and there you go. Bada boom, the U.S. hits it, the internet is down. You're going to have all of our naval bases along the East Coast are going to be destroyed. Our internet's going to be destroyed. Our leadership, Washington, is gone. Remember, Ed Dames, Dr. Doom.
Dr. Doom, right.
He remote viewed, and what started him on his kill shot theory was that they remote viewed in the future. They were using the Supreme Court building, which they saw in the future as being under 100 feet of brackish water. That would be a tsunami. All right? And there's a lot of occurrences. I find that what the guides here are talking about, same thing that he's talking about with this kill shot, it just keeps coming up. Am I saying this is absolutely certain to happen? No, because my first rule of prophecy and predictions are be aware of them, but don't live in expectation of them.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it. And, all this talk before, all these years ago, it might have been, or it might have sounded crazy at the time, but, in hindsight, it's pretty accurate now.
It is. And so, it comes to the next question. You have something like this. Russia and China say, that's it. We're going to take out NATO and the United States and Europe. We're going to make so much grief for you. You're just not going to have, your hands are full. You're not going to be able to communicate.
Right.
That's it. It's total devastation. And only one event. They got to just drop one tungsten rod on that one coordinate north of La Palma and hit that nexus of subsea cables. Boy, talk about BOGO, buy one, get one free, right?
That's right. And of course, an EMP, if in case something like that does go off, electromagnetic pulse or another sort of weapon of mass destruction of sorts, something that wouldn't be hitting, the bottom of the ocean floor, telephones and cell phones and the internet will be gone for sure. And of course, it will affect the radio system as well. It can affect the two-way radio system as well, but there's also ways to sort of protect that from happening as well. So it isn't exactly completely out of the realm to still be using a CB radio like we're talking about here. In case the listeners out there are saying, but if that happens, that means that all communication's lost. It's like, yes, but not exactly.
Now, here's what I want your listeners to know, because what I want to do as we go through the rest of this little presentation,
right?
And I have designed this so that Everyone says, oh, yeah, get a CB, get a CB, get a CB. If you don't have a CB, you don't know what you're talking about because it's not the right kind of CB. You don't want the CBs truckers use.
Yes.
You want the CBs actually that are more popular with farmers and amateurs, called single sideband CB. So let's get into that. Let's talk about we're not dependent. You and I are not dependent on some third party to provide us with connectivity.
Right.
We connect. I can talk to you. You can talk to me. We both have a radio, and there's no middlemen between us. All right? And we're at a distance. You could be a couple 100 miles from me. And if you're doing ham radio, like I said, ham radios, you're in the thousands of dollars. But single sideband citizen band radio, you're in the hundreds of dollars, just a few $100s. And you have a radio that is a low-cost two-way radio for survival communications, both near and far. So let's take what I'm saying, CB near. I'm talking, this is what truck drivers do. And they're using just standard CBs. They're not using single sideband CBs because single side CBs, and we look at the range on that, are much bigger, much bigger. All right. And let me just jump back into this.
No worries.
Here. I dropped my screen.
That's okay.
So we have CBs, which are near. Truck drivers use CBs, just standard CBs, not single sideband CBs, because with a single sideband CB, all right, a regular CB, you're a few miles around you. With a single sideband CB, you're hundreds of miles. There's actually people that use single sideband CBs that have communications. They're on the East Coast, and they're actually able to talk to people in Europe.
Wow.
On these little radios that only cost a few $100s. It's really an amazing technology. So let's, look at what you have with your rough estimates for maximum range. With CB, you're up to 5 miles optimally. And with single sideband, you're hundreds of miles. With ham radio, you can go a third of the way around the earth. Okay? But with ham radios, you got to know what you're doing, and they're expensive. Single sideband and regular CBs, again, few $100s. But where do CB radios and ham radios exist in the overall picture of things, the FCC band plan? All right? Now, if you are an amateur ham radio operator, you know your U.S. amateur radio bands. And what a lot of people don't realize is that a single sideband CB is nothing more than a low-cost, bare-bones ham radio because you're working in the amateur bands area. A CB and single sideband CB are on the 11-meter band, which is between the ham 10 meter and the ham 12 meter. So what does this mean? Well, if you're just a regular CB, you got 4 watts of transfer power, so it's a very limited range of up to 5 miles, basically about 3 to 4 in general. But then you have, you're doing what's called AM, amplitude modulation. And that's the mode. Amplitude modulation gives you a ground wave. And also, it can give you what's called random skip, a skywave that's a random skip. And occasionally people have CBs actually can talk to people at great distances. But it's one of those catch-can kind of deals. How are you going to do this so you can regularly do it? All right? Well, now what you have is instead of AM mode, you have either upper sideband or lower sideband. And upper sideband, lower sideband are two sides of the same coin. But the difference is that your transmit power is 12 watts as opposed with AM for 4. And you can have a range of over 1,000 miles if you got the right antenna. Same thing with lower sideband. Now, with both upper sideband and lower sideband, you have a solid skywave. You're bouncing off the ionosphere. So this is the reason why when you have just a regular CB, you have ground wave. So that's near. But when you're single sideband CB, you have the ground wave plus you have the skywave as well. Now, what do you want for radios? Well, affordable SSB CB radios. In my book, we talk about three of them. Radio Free Earth is the Uniden, the Present McKinley, and the Galaxy. They're all good. It just depends on what you like,
right?
What you want to do. But the important thing about these radios is it's not like ham radios with a gazillion buttons and knobs on them. It's pretty simple, straightforward. Again, bare bones. But I will tell you this, if you know how to use a single sideband CB radio, you already know what the most important things so that if you sat down with a ham radio, you could operate it. Because to be honest, most of the features on ham radios are filters and stuff like that, gizmos and gadgets that they use to fine tune in conversations. And that's important. Now, why is it truckers don't like single sideband CB radios? That's simple. Because you got to fiddle with them. They're a little quirky. And AM, a standard CB, it's in AM mode. That's it. Key the mic. There you go. If you're doing single sideband, you're always having to do a little bit of fine tuning here and there to get that signal in. And if you're hurling down the road in an 18-wheeler, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
But on
Probably
the other
not.
hand, there are a lot of farmers that have single sideband CB radios and amateurs, and they love them. They don't mind because they're at home and they have a home set up and they can sit there and fiddle with it all day long. Now, when you're buying these things, these three brands of radios, you're talking about just a few $100s. And in many cases, it's under $200. Most cases, they're under $200. However, here's the fantastic thing. A lot of people don't realize there's more even single sideband CBs, which in this world of CBs, there's not. The other ones, there are many more of them, the more simple ones. But there are probably just as many single sideband CBs, if not more, than ham radios. And the great thing is you have what I call single sideband CB bargain hunting. A lot of folks don't understand the value of these things. And so you go to a flea market, garage sale, they got CB radios, there's Dad's old CB, put it out there. Now that you understand the modes, you understand what to look for, you want to make sure that radio has a setting for three modes, AM, upper, and lower. Okay, you see that's a single sideband radio. That's pretty easy. Now, when you're buying, if you want to buy, what you want to do is, obviously, they all run off a 12 volt. You can power them off the battery in your car. And you want to fire it up and see if it's going to work. But with all radios, never use the microphone unless you have an antenna connected to that radio. If you're shopping around and say, okay, let's fire it up. Let's see if it's still, let's see if it'll light.
Right.
And you key the mic and there's no antenna, you'll blow out the finals and that's the end of the radio. So you don't want to do that. But also, a lot of times these people, they'll sell it to you for bubkiss. So even if it turns out, it's a problem, if you have 2 or 3 of those radios, you got spare parts, that's fine. And so shop around. And you're looking, particularly garage sales. I have found wonderful deals on radios at garage sales. Not ham radios. Ham radios, people understand those are worth money. But CBs, people don't understand. Now, another thing that's really important with CBs is the antennas.
And also eBay, by the way.
Antennas that you see. That's right. That's right. And there's just tons of them. You can have magnetic mounts, but if you really want that distance, you're looking for, essentially, my favorite are just wire antennas, like a dipole hanging off of a couple of trees. boy, you put 11-meter dipole up there, you're going to reach out and touch somebody.
You can talk far with those, yeah. You can reach someone in Australia.
Wow. And the thing is that you see the antennas you see on the trucks, and you're going to generally with trucks you're going to see one antenna, which is going to give you 360 degrees of coverage. But the problem with those antennas is that they tend to pick up interference from the truck and the trailer itself. And so you see a lot of trucks will put these dual CB antennas up. Now this is a tuned array, and it's designed to project most of the coverage in front of you and behind you, as opposed to the sides of you. And also those two antennas, and you'll see those two antennas typically are mounted on the rear view mirrors. That's a favorite place. And you'll see those on each rearview mirror. And so that is someone who's using a CB with good antennas for really good reception forwards and backwards. This is how the Canadians, truckers, caught us off guard. See, in America, CB radios are not that much in trucks anymore because 90% or more of the trucks on the road are owned by corporations, and they only put in, if they put in anything, it'll be GPS. They don't install CBs.
Yeah.
Drivers have to do it themselves. Owner-operators, most all owner-operators will have a CB. In Canada, all truckers are owner-operators. So this is where the Canadian freedom movement really came to be, was up in Canada, where you have owner-operator truck drivers, and they're out on the road and they're talking to each other on their CBs. And I'm going to tell you something. The police will monitor 19 for emergencies, and that's a good thing. Otherwise, it's unmonitored, you're moving, it's difficult to track, way open ground. This is the reason why everyone was blindsided, including the elites, by the truckers, because most of the communication that happened to create this groundswell of popular support for the movement was happening on CB.
Through the radio, this grassroots movement that just came out of nowhere.
That's right, and you can't censor a CB. You can just simply create enough noise that nobody can use that frequency. So fine, move to another frequency.
Yeah.
That's the thing. And you have the right antenna, you're doing all that, you're in good shape. Now, what to do, how to get started. You want to do a single sideband CB, but for those people who haven't done it, what I really suggest to everyone is, it's good to get on Amazon and do a lot of research and a lot of looking around. But there's also learning curve. And there's a fastest way to jump that learning curve is to work with a CB radio shop. They're not that easy to find anymore, but you find one.
Pretty hard.
And this is typically guys that are doing it. They come from engineering backgrounds, and they just love the technology. And here's what a good CB radio shop can do for you. If you buy a new radio, you can get it fine-tuned. Why do you want to do that? Because the factories will set the radios to a general setting that'll work across the board. But those radios can perform, in certain respects, well above that.
Yeah.
So a CB radio shop can sit there and go through take the radio right new out of the box, and they'll open it up and they fine tune it. There's going to be all kinds of ways that they can go in, several different ways they can fine tune that and really get that radio humming to the top of its capability. So I don't care if it's new or used, you want to do that. Now, with the bargain radios that you're finding out there at swap meets or,
eBay or anywhere,
eBay, wherever. One of the things you have to remember about old CBs is there are components that deteriorate with age and have to be replaced. It's not major, but they have to be replaced. And so if you get a really good deal on an old CB, like you find a single sideband CB that was made by Radio Shack, all right, hey, it's worth fixing it. If you buy it for $5 or $10 and you put another 60 or 70 into it to have it repaired and fine-tuned, hey, that is a good deal. But also what you want is antenna tuning. So you want to buy it as a package. This is where, again, you want that maximum performance. And so that's the reason why with a CB radio shop, you got to sit down and you tell the guy this is what you want to do. If you're a truck driver, he's going to say, look, get a CB. You don't need single sideband. Because who's going to fiddle with the knobs while you're going down the road? But for everybody else, and there are a lot of truckers that still buy single sideband because they like to play with it when they are parked. But the antenna tuning, remember we talked about the two antennas that truckers put on their rearview mirrors.
Right.
All right. This is an antenna system. So when you start doing antenna tuning and you're tuning it to work with your radio, so both of them are being integrated as a package, now you have maximum performance, maximum range. And it's really, really worth it. And if the guy charges you $100 or whatever to do the work, spend the money. It's worth it. It's worth it by twice the price.
Yeah, it might save your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So
it's a good thing to invest. Yeah, that and probably a power generator of sorts, and the radio. That the two most essential things.
Well, here's an interesting thing about QRP radios. QRP are CB radios. They're called, hams call them QRP, which is a designation for low power. All right. And low power is 12 watts or less. So it's a QRP. Now, if you have a ham radio, it's going to be 25, 50, 100 watts, something like that. For example, if you can remember, yellow cabs. We used to get in taxis. Now everything's smartphones.
Right.
But remember when they had the radios?
They did, yeah.
Taxi cabs had those old Motorola radios. I mean, they are built like a brick.
Oh, yeah.
The only way to kill those things is with a 45 at point-blank range. And that was a 25-watt radio. And they could talk all around town on that with just 25 watts. Now, what else can you do with 25 watts? 25 watts is enough power to bounce signals off of satellites in low Earth orbit that are designed to work with ham radios. They're not designed to work with CBs, but they are designed to work with ham radios. And if you're doing 100 watts, you could actually bounce your signals off the moon and cover a third of the Earth. Hams can do some amazing things, all right? And but, again, here are the differences. You're in a CB, it's a few $100s. You learn everything very quickly. If you're a ham, it's thousands of dollars, and it's going to take you some serious time to learn all that stuff. But you want to learn it because if you can operate ham radios, that gives you a whole new world of functionality. You can send digital files, you can send video files, you can set up relays, messages are automatically moved from one computer to the next. You can have what's called TTY communication. You interface your ham radio with your laptop, and I could be sitting here and typing a message on my keyboard that's coming up on your screen, and you do the same. No difference than texting. So ham radios give you a world of opportunities. Remember, single sidebands are bare bones, but that's their beauty. Also, the power is essential. A 12-watt single sideband CB runs on 12 volts. Well, so do the ham radios. They work on 12 volts. But in your car, the difference is a CB, because it's not pulling that much power, you can plug it into any cigarette lighter plug in the vehicle, and it'll work just fine. You take a ham radio that's a 50-watt radio and do that, something's going to burn, all right? You're going to pull way too much power, and something's going to pop. That's the reason why, if you're installing a ham radio in a car that is going to have this much higher power, you have to actually connect it directly to the battery. You have to have wires that are going straight to the battery. And a lot of hams actually will set up a second battery just to power their radios. So from doing power standpoint, that's one of the reasons why CBs are so portable, so wonderful, because they're QRP, they're low power. Anywhere you can put 12 volts. So you take a CB radio, and here's something. If you're monitoring, you're just taking a very little amount of power. It's when you press the key to transmit, that's when it starts. That's when the load comes, and that's where it starts to pull it. But you could take a CB radio and run it all day long off, take a 12-volt battery out of your lawnmower, your riding lawnmower, all right? That'll work fine. You can charge that up. Take and recharge that with a solar cell. So you have all kinds of, because the power demand is so small with single sideband CB, it gives you a lot of flexibility that hams don't have with their much more substantial equipment. So, and in addition to it just being easy enough for you to figure out real fast and without breaking the bank. But you still want to go and get, if you have a community, you still want to have those ham radios because you want to be able to communicate effectively with other people. And that is what my book, The Complete Beginner's Guide to Survival Communications, Radio Free Earth, that's what it's all about. You read this book, it's soup to nuts, alpha to omega. Everything you need to know about ham radios, CBs, anything, any kind of two-way radio you can buy today, I talk about in this. Because even if you don't buy it, you don't buy these expensive ham radios, you need to understand what they are and what they can do, because you're going to be scrounging. And you're going to find these things that haven't been toasted because they weren't connected to a power source when the EMP hit. But you can look at it and you can see a radio and go, oh my gosh, look at that. It's a police radio. That's got to be exactly what we want. Stupid. Because police radios are digital now. And it is a Tower of Babel out there. When I was training with FEMA, I trained to work in large fires where you bring in multi-jurisdictional, a lot of people coming in. They all have different radios, different radio frequencies, and getting them coordinated was a nightmare.
Oh, I bet.
Because digital radios, the government set a standard, an open source standard, if you will, for everybody. But what do all the radio manufacturers do? They add all these proprietary add-ons. And it's their proprietary add-ons that create a system that just simply won't work. And literally, the easiest way to do it was, instead of trying to coordinate all these different radios with all these different, you maybe have 4 or 5 different fire departments and 3 or 4 police departments, so forth. The easiest way to coordinate all those people and their radios was not to use their radios. They would just go out and buy a huge bucket. They'd load up a bucket with 100 of these little cheap Chinese handheld radios, pre-program the whole thing, and just pass them out. And that was the easiest way to solve the problem.
That'll work too, yeah.
All right. So you don't want those radios. They're a waste of time. You want radios you can use. You want old analog radios. You want to go old school. Now, when you finish reading Radio Free Earth, the Complete Beginner's Guide to Survival Communications, you're going to know how, what, why, where, for every kind of two-way radio you can buy today. And when I say buy, I'm not talking about you got to go out. You don't have to have a license to buy any radio. You just walk into a radio store, put cash on the counter, and when the guy says, who do I make it out to, say Santa Claus North Pole, and he says, fine, Santa, here you go. All right, here's your radio. So this whole thing, the government's going to come and confiscate everything. Yeah, if you buy it on your MasterCard or through Amazon or something like that, you can bet your sweet bippies they can track you down if they get desperate enough to do that. But otherwise, every two-way radio I talk about in Radio Free Earth, you can buy and pay cash. No, you don't need a license to buy it, and you don't need a license to listen with any radio, whether it is a CB or a ham radio. The only time you have to have a radio license is when you start transmitting on a ham radio. Then you have to have a license. Then you have a call sign, like mine is KG7ZHD. All right? And you got to be able to identify yourself.
Yeah, you're legally required to ID yourself.
That's right. However, once things go sideways and all of this is collapsing,
yeah, it's not going to really matter.
It's not going to matter.
Yeah, not at all.
But if you have it, what does it give you the power? First off, you're able to communicate with people a long distance. You can get reliable communications. You can transmit, and this is the important part. You can send blueprints, a how-to video on how to do it. Yeah, it's not as fast as a smartphone, nowhere near. But you can get it out there. You can share that information, and you can find other people fairly easy. And this is going to be part of, to me, two-way radios. Radio Free Earth is not only for survival, but it's to optimize the benefits of what I see in a post-catastrophe situation of a technological renaissance. We don't go into a technological black ages. We're going to go into a technological renaissance.
Pretty much, yeah.
Now, if you say, Marshall, that sounds a little strange, okay? I'd say, well, okay, it sounds a little strange. But consider this. We know about the cars that'll run on water instead of gasoline, right? And we've seen the old videos of them driving around and proving that it works. We see people that find cures, simple cures, for really terrible diseases. We find people that discover ways to make energy that are simple and reliable. So why is it these have all been pushed aside? Is it because it's all a bunch of nonsense by idiots who've gone off and invented something ridiculous and think they're all important? No. You invent something that is disruptive technology, and I can guarantee you, you've got all these special interests, and they're sitting right there at the front of the patent office, and they're looking at everything that comes through the door. And the minute they see you're putting your thumb in their rice bowl, they're going to call the FBI. And the FBI is going to say, yes, sir, we'll send out our goons with the machine guns and the dogs, scare the shit out of the wife and the kids. We're going to take everything, destroy their lives, and we will keep destroying their lives so that they'll never bother you again. Sir, yes, sir, we're the FBI, and we're here to suppress innovation. And guess what? We don't see these things. So what happens when all of a sudden there are no more goons with dogs and submachine guns because the FBI gets a call from a special interest? These people are going to say, wow, we found a way to generate free energy. We have a cure for cancer. We have a way to cure vision problems. We found better way to make something this. We found a better way to do that. We found this is going to help you. And it's all going to be ham radios. That's where it's going to pump, because ham radios can carry that traffic. They can do it. You know, if you're going to, think about it. A CB is like a pickup truck, and a ham radio is like an 18-wheeler. Now, which one's going to carry more? They're going to both go as fast. They're going to both go the same distance. Which one can haul the freight? The 18-wheeler. That's a ham radio. But you got to know what you're doing, just like you got to know what you're doing when you drive an 18-wheeler. So this is, for me, these radios are this is how we are going to create a clean slate for a new beginning with all kinds of technological innovation, because we no longer have special interests and government goons crushing it. And amazing things will happen. Amazing things. We can't give up hope for the future. You just don't do it. Because the minute you give up hope, they got you.
They got you, indeed. And Marshall, we are coming to a close here. It's been a good 2 hours here with us, and of course, I know your time is vital. And yes, Marshall, you went over some very vital information here that I think the world needs to hear.
That's right. And I provided you with this ebook, Communication Blackout ebook, and it has all of the slides that everything we've been talking about. So for those of you who want to listen to this interview, if you download that ebook, it's going to follow what's in this slides. And then you can also print them out and you can keep it. And the reason why I'm doing these ebooks is it is a way to circumvent the suppression, because I'm not on a platform where I can be censored. Send it to your friends.
Right on. And of course, Marshall, you have seen plenty of censorship going on with your own channel on YouTube and your website. You've had all these people trying to take you down.
Yeah. But, hey, like they used to say in World War II, if you're not taking flak, you're not over the target.
That's true. You definitely are resonating with all kinds of people, from people that want to help and support you to people that want to take you down. So you are doing the right thing, Mr. Masters. And again, it's an honor and pleasure to have you here on the program, and we'll do it again soon.
Absolutely.